Hey everybody, welcome back to Matrix Mash. It's been a few weeks. I'm Emily Moyer from Off Planet Radio, and Robert from robertphoenix.com and 11th House Astrology is with me. And this is not going to be the typical mash. Usually, even though some of the things we cover are disturbing, we are able to find some of the humor, however dark, in them. But today I'm not feeling very humorous at all. I know Robert talked about it a little bit on his show this morning, and I'm sure many of you have heard by now. I don't know when exactly this will go out, but it will be soon. Tracy Twyman has passed. We don't have a lot of explanation yet, but those of us who are familiar with her work really don't need an explanation. I think it's pretty clear what happened here, and so we're going to start kind of just with that. We're going to talk a little bit about Tracy, and I know Robert already did this morning, and then we may get into some other things, but I am not feeling like myself today. So, but I felt like I wanted to get on and talk about this because she was one of my favorite researchers. And I think that intuitively, I always kind of understood that if there was going to be one of us who got there first, it was going to be her. And I was hoping for a different outcome when somebody got there first than this one. But she was, I have interviewed her. She was the first solo interview I ever did, and she was very kind to me. You know, I had just started with Randy, and he was not able to do it that day because she could only do interviews when her child was not home, and so that meant weekdays during the day. And so I interviewed her by myself. That was the first one I did. You can go back and watch that interview on the Off Planet Media channel. I still was very, novice at this, and she was very kind. And I told her before we started, it was my first time doing it by myself. And we actually had a pretty good show. And afterwards, she thanked me, and she said she really enjoyed it. Sometimes she doesn't know about doing shows with someone she's never heard of before, but we had a good show. We stayed in touch a little bit after that. I'd been wanting to connect with her again, but it was always difficult with the schedule. And then she was on and off the internet because of what was happening with her. But she's so interesting because I don't know if you know about where she started from. Aside, we all know she started with the esoteric and the occult, but her first thoughts about mind control was that it was BS and that people were having false memory syndrome. And she put out a lot of information based on that. And over the arc of her career, she came to a place where not only did she now believe that mind control was a real thing, but she, in the end, was experiencing it herself. And, so she got to experience that full arc of understanding what is going on in the world. And we also, in that interview, talked about, I asked her straight up if she felt like some of the stuff she had done about poking through to the other side, not just informationally, but actually trying to contact things on the other side, if she had been harmed by that and if she was put in danger. And she told me that, sometimes when bad things happen to her, she wonders that, but ultimately she wanted to know more than she was scared. And so I have a lot of respect for her for that. Robert, good morning.
Yeah. When I saw this, I felt sick to my stomach.
I still do. Yeah.
I mean, another, quote unquote, truther, or I wouldn't call Tracy a truther. Tracy was a very kind of specific individual, a very deep, esoteric, occult researcher who was in the business of getting to the truth. But I would not put her in the same camp as...
No, she was a loner. She was not, while I'd say there was many people from the truther community that respected her, there was also those of her that thought she was evil because of the things she looked into and probably think at this point maybe that, she got something that she deserved and they are wrong. But she was a loner.
Yeah, a couple of days ago I heard that Justin Raimundo also passed away, and that was kind of shocking. And
I'm not familiar with that person. You mentioned that this morning. I heard about Tracy from Randy last night, and Randy's also extremely disturbed by this, and he's the one who sent me a lot of, I heard about this last night and then got some further information from him this morning and whatnot, but I haven't heard of Justin Raimundo. You told me about him this morning. Can you tell us who that is?
Yeah, he was kind of a, rip the skin off the deep state guy. And he was actually very honest and one of the few people that would look at a situation politically and address it from as much of a place of neutrality and truth as possible. And he's gone, and it's you know, and now Tracy, Tracy was really, like I said, I felt sick to my stomach. I was on GLP, and I saw, it's like, I couldn't believe what I was reading.
Yeah.
And my experience with Tracy, fairly limited. I knew who she was. She knew who I was. She booked me for Clyde Lewis's show when she was his producer. I tried to get her on my show after she'd written her book, which that was kind of mind blowing, that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
In her book, and she
has several books, but are you speaking about Genuflect?
The time clocks one.
Oh, it's the clock shavings. Yeah.
Clock shaving. Yeah, it was like, wow. And she was not in a place where she was doing interviews at that point. Tracy was somebody who would blink on and off a lot. And based on that video you sent me, I completely understand why.
Yep.
I completely understand why she blinked on and off, because she was playing with some very dark and dangerous people and dangerous entities.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, the thing about Tracy that I think is different than any of the rest of us is she had knowledge, like we all know stuff, right? But she had knowledge at all the levels that you need to have knowledge at to be able to put together the puzzle that does not going to make logical sense to anybody else except for someone who might know everything that you know, right? And so I don't know if I sent you that quote that Randy sent me that somebody posted about her, but basically, you know, when someone like that comes along, they got to take her out before she has enough time to string it together in a way that will make sense to everybody else. It already made sense to her, right? Yeah. But you know, she had, you know, she was a stay-at-home mom. You know, I mean, she obviously didn't do nothing. She wasn't a housewife, but she didn't feel the need like the rest of us to go out and get a lot of other jobs. I know she worked for Clyde for a time being, but this was her life's work. She wanted to know. And so she researched at that deep esoteric and had historical, mythological, metaphysical level. And also she looked at politics. I mean, she looked at things like Q, which a lot of us decided we didn't have time for, we thought was silly. And on lawyers' big level it was, but I don't know if you ever heard the work she did on Q, but that was the only thing that grabbed my interest. And that was when she put that out, that was when her troubles actually began. It was about 14 or 15 months ago.
Interesting. No, I was not up on her Q stuff. Can you distill and just break it down for people?
I may have a download of that MP3 where she's talking about it. I'm sure many things got removed when she deleted all of her work from the internet. But she basically was decoding it in a completely different way and had gotten into I can't remember all the details, but had gotten into this thing where she was basically talking about Disney World and there being a ride there at Disney World that if you were wearing this particular pin that some children had, when you were on this ride at a certain point, the light would reflect against it in a way where something opened up like a kingdom above. Okay, and this is how a lot of this stuff works. You see something from a certain angle and there's something there that isn't there from the other angles, right? If you line yourself up with a certain reality, you can enter that reality. And so I'm just giving this was a very interesting little clip she did where she was talking about this. And then she started doing that plus ultra thing on her website where she was talking more about this behind a paywall because she had recognized the complications with talking about some of this publicly. And I, at that time, and still didn't really have too much time to dig into it. I know some people who tried to join the Plus Ultra, some with success, some with not. People would have, it seemed like they were blocking people from being able to get in there. Not Tracy. Obviously, when you hear what was going on with her and her technology, they wanted to limit her from being able to make a living and being able to have, organic interaction with people online. So I know some people who were able to join and others who weren't, but even the people that were able to join would have trouble logging in sometimes and whatnot. So this is where she was documenting the Q stuff, and then I think it led into some of this further things with the pedophilia and the mind control and other things she was finding. you know, there's a few other people, you know, Derek Rose has gotten in. When the last time I had him on the show, he was talking about some of these videos online as well. And so, you know, I hope he's paying attention to what's going on here. And I know he's not scared, and he's going to continue to do what he does. And I encourage him to do so, but just be aware and be careful, Derek, because Derek is a wonderful person. He did that excellent documentary, The Finders, about the Epstein case and about the Finders cult. And I actually think a lot of his work has been helpful in the outcome that we're seeing now with Jeffrey Epstein, but I think there's blowback to that. And I think Tracy, you know, it's entirely possible that she is part of that. There are some, if you watch that video, we'll link to it. I know you linked to it this morning. There's some strange stuff there that's bringing up all sorts of things and thoughts and ideas in my mind, you know, about what is going on. Yeah.
You know, it was really interesting for me to watch that video. And the video in question it's about a 25-minute video, and it's mostly Tracy talking with a few visuals.
Mm-hmm.
And she is getting into, I'm not going to name any names, but if you want to watch the video, you can watch the video. I've got it linked up on my Facebook page, the 11th House, and it's on my YouTube channel from today, 15 Minutes of Flame. And I also downloaded the video and I put it up on BitChute just to make sure that it's out there. I feel like the video needs to go viral, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as many people need to see that video as possible, if only to honor Tracy and her work, right? This is somebody who put her life at risk.
Mm-hmm. Over and over, yeah.
In order to protect her child and the future for her child in this realm that we're living in, okay? And she paid the ultimate price. Now that child doesn't have a mother. And we don't know what the conditions were, or what happened to Tracy. So it's not always wise to speculate. But the simple math, you know, the equation of the simple math looks like a very, very dark number.
Yeah.
And so anyway, maybe we'll put the link up to the video here.
Yeah.
With the show, and that way you guys can see it and watch it for yourself. And what really struck me about that video was a couple of different things. And one is the nature of cruelty, and the other was the fact that there's this Gemini theme running through that video. And you'll see, if you pay attention, you'll see it on two levels. You'll see one person be one person and then become another person.
Literally and figuratively and possibly literally.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, the name Gemini is even used as it's ascribed to one of the characters inside that video. So when we get into Gemini from an astrological perspective, and I've always felt like Gemini is the key to pretty much everything we experience on this planet because it represents duality. The magical rituals on this planet are based around Gemini, right? They're based on the Twin Towers. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But they're based upon the Twin Towers, the checkerboard pattern of the chess game, of the floor of the Masonic Temple, and the Twin Towers of Boaz and Yakin. They represent Gemini, polarity, and duality. And it is between the poles of those two towers that this field is created.
And that topic came up over and over and over again throughout all of Tracy's work.
That there's a distortion field between those two poles. And we are caught in a flux between these two poles.
Were you a Fringe watcher? Whenever they were trying to interrupt the field to move between universes, they would set up, you know, that kind of thing, and then there would be sort of energy shot between the two poles, and that's how they would go into the other universe or the other dimensions or peek into the other side and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know you're the Fringe Sherpa. I saw a few episodes.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. And so in that video that Tracy is kind of unfolding sort of this very kind of dark part of how old is that video, by the way? Do you know when she put that up?
So it was just posted today by Crypto Beast, who I believe is Steve Outram, who's also the guy who has exposed a lot of things about Burning Man and whatnot. He's an interesting character.
Yeah.
So he said that she had asked him to, she had given it to him.
Okay.
I think this was her dead man switch, maybe. You know, her dead, so I think this was her insurance file.
Right.
You know what I mean, or whatever, because it was just posted on the 10th, yesterday, when all this came out. So you guys can go to the Crypto Beast and watch it, or it'll be linked here. I don't know how long it will stay up there. So I'm not sure when that was made. It was obviously made after Isaac Cappy's death.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And so.
That's right. Yeah. So there's some very interesting things inside that video as it relates to Gemini, because of, well, when you see the video, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And I think she really stumbled into this very strange kind of, I wouldn't call it nature of reality, but like kind of, it's almost like in Stranger Things.
I was thinking about this morning. Stranger Things has everything except for they haven't, and I don't know if they ever will, but they haven't talked about the pedophilia, right? But it's got all the other elements of what's actually going on. Yeah. Maybe there hasn't been anything much about, there hasn't been anything about banking yet or pedophilia. So I don't know if that's coming later, or if this is one of those things they put out there to just, you know, make people focus in on one aspect of things, because you can't hide the truth completely for much longer. But yeah, it's exactly like Stranger Things. In fact,
because there's the upside down Stranger Things, and Tracy winds up having a friendship with somebody who she thought was an ally. And then all of a sudden that ally flips. And it's like, excuse me, it's like the upside down becomes activated. And now she's sort of burrowing through this underworld now. Where she has her same computer, but a different reality coming through that computer, where people are not who they seemed to be, right? Where, Right. And I can only guess how harrowing that must have felt for her. And I don't think she's a person that scares easily. My perception of her from the conversation I had with her and some other emails was that she just, you know, like it came with the territory and she understood that. So she doesn't seem like a person who frightened easily. And so the fact that she was frightened enough to remove her content from the internet and to kind of disappear the way she did for a while, she must have been really scared. Yeah. Yep. Is she in a relationship to James Twyman? I don't know. Who's James Twyman? So James Twyman also lives in Oregon. Huh. And James Twyman, Jimmy Twyman, is, I'd say, a rather dubious character in a lot of ways. And he wrote a book called, I think it's called The Messengers. And supposedly it was about him going to Kosovo during the time when Kosovo was getting bombed out in the 90s. And he winds up meeting this very wise man who kind of instructs him on the nature of life in the universe in the midst of, you know, kind of this hellish day-to-day existence. It was along the lines of the Celestine. You know, there were these books, these kind of spiritual novels, that were sort of happening, and it fell into that category. And Jimmy made it all up, right? Which is not uncommon with that genre, by the way. But he made it all up, but it catapulted him. I've never heard of him. Into public, sort of this public. And I met him. I met him once, and the world is so weird, you know. So I'm wondering, you know, all this is, you know, there's been a lot of activity going on in Portland, and Tracy lived in Portland. But even with Twyman, there's two Twymans. Right, Gemini. The Gemini effect. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if she's related. I have no idea. She never mentioned anything like that, you know. Right. I was not. I mean, I had that one interview with her, and you know, maybe a dozen emails. Right. But Oregon, there's some
weird stuff going on in Oregon right now. And did you say he was from Oregon as well?
Yes.
Yeah. And that kind of, Voodoo Donuts was in Oregon. And then some of that, if you guys look at that video, and there's a link below it in the video to, I think, Steve Outrum's burner.me page. There's some links to someone who has a show named RX Picture Show that she was on sometimes, and his conversations with her where she's talking, and there's something about Voodoo Donuts, and she had been doing research and nothing seemed to be being done, and she felt like she should stop because of how close she is to Voodoo Donuts, right? And Voodoo Donuts is there in Portland. We are seeing all of this crazy Antifa activity going on in Portland. That was the other big, that was the big story the last, week and a half ago, was Andy No, NGO, which is weird that his last name is NGO because I think this is going on there. But he was, there's a lot of footage of him being beaten by Antifa, and it's gotten major coverage, even in some of the mainstream media and all over the alternative media. And it seems like the Portland police are siding with Antifa or something like that, right? And these weird Antifa things have been going on, obviously, in a lot of places, but most prevalently in Portland. There, when we hear these things being discussed in what I term the alternative media, you hear Tim Pool or Joe Rogan or some of the Weinstein brothers, even though there's a lot of truth there. One of the things that I'm hearing people talk about is, it was even in the clip with Joe Rogan of Andy No, about, well, maybe there needs to be laws for people not being able to wear masks. And it dawned on me this morning as I'm laying there, syncretizing things, trying to figure out what's going on here, that a lot of this stuff with Antifa could be to get the people who are, sane-minded to ask for a law where people cannot wear masks, just as facial recognition software is being heavily rolled out, right? And because that could become a tactic at some point when facial recognition software is deployed everywhere, would be to wear masks when you go out in public. I'm not saying I have an opinion on that one way or another, but if you get the very people who may one day be in need of a mask to beg for a law where you cannot wear masks, then you've gotten them to beg for their own enslavement, right?
Right.
And so I'm looking at that angle. And Portland, I'm curious as to how much, I know it's one of the places where they have a lot of the micro apartments and a lot of smart apartments and surveillance and things like that. So, there's also the other thing that came out of Portland in the last year that's been very interesting was those grievance studies papers were largely come from Peter Boghossian, who is a professor at Portland State who's in danger of losing his tenure because he participated in this, but they are basically exposing how ridiculous some of these left-wing academic journals have gotten with the intersectionality and, crazy stuff, right? So if you guys can go to Mike Nana's YouTube channel and watch all the documentation of what's called the grievance studies, it's very interesting. So Portland seems to be, and I also know that the Brett Weinstein and his wife, who, were excavated from Evergreen College in Olympia, Washington, relocated, I believe, to the Portland area. So this seems to be ground zero for activity on that social level. But look at how long, I have mixed feelings about Clyde Lewis on a certain level, but I think you did a good job explaining him this morning, right? I think you gave a very accurate representation of him. I do think he's been told not to talk about things. I know someone who's told me that, and that he doesn't talk about those, But he also has been victim of all sorts of health things, cancer, that he had that other thing with some sort of cytokine storm in his body where, he's had all sorts of very strange things happen that usually came on the heels of unusual show. He has stepped out and had people on his show that all of the, because I consider him to be on that border of mainstream media, like a Coast to Coast or an Alex, you know what I mean? He's syndicated, right? So he's had people on that other people won't have on, like my friend Sean Gautreaux, who has been ignored by everybody who talks about the secret space program and all that kind of stuff, but actually has the evidence, right? he would take the risk and have some people on. You know, he has had on Elisa on many times, talked about some really dark stuff. He had you on, right? And, you know,
I've been on Clyde's show 3 times.
He's had you on, and you know, I've noticed that there's been a lot of shows that you've been on once and then never again, or you had a successful show on that network and then it would be dropped and, you know, replaced with somebody who was nonsense and whatever. So
I was on Higher Side Chats one time, and I never went back on the show.
Never went back.
I don't have a problem with it.
No, but it's interesting, you know, but there's, you know, he's had another astrologer who I find far less interesting than you on many, many times. Mm-hmm. You know, so Clyde, I think, was naturally attracted to the edge. And you're right. I think that they find a person's soft spot. And for him, his soft spot is his health and his wife.
That's right.
And they work it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Clyde's a Pisces. And he...
Oh, that makes sense.
Pisces tend to have very wide apertures. Mm-hmm. And they're incredibly sensitive. Clyde is not your typical Pisces. He's a dragon. He's born in '64, so he's a dragon Pisces. So he has a lot of energy, and dragon people tend to have a lot of tenacity in the Western system. The dragon is Aries, so you know that gives you kind of an idea of what the dragon energy is like. And I think he's probably shaken to his core. You know, sure. I say. So I want to read something. I found something while you were talking. It's about James Twyman and Tracy Twyman. It's kind of interesting, okay?
Okay.
But before I get into that, I was thinking about our show that we did on Joe Rogan. Mm-hmm. And how Joe Rogan has these kids.
Yep.
And I could see where Joe Rogan would basically say, you know what? And I'm not necessarily giving Rogan a pass per se. There are times when I think he needs to be a better interviewer. I'm sorry.
I feel exactly the same. I don't hate him. I don't think we should give him a pass, but I understand what's going on.
But he's got kids.
He's got kids and he's got a wife.
That's right.
And a good life.
That's right. And so I understand him making a business decision. Mm-hmm. Alex Jones, even if you think he's an inside guy or a cutout or a limited hang, he's got kids too. Right. And I think Alex has suffered, and maybe at the hands of his own suffering or his own constitution in some ways. But clearly there was a different path there between the two of them.
I think they found Alex's soft spot really on, and that's his ego. Right. And so and he doesn't like to be wrong, and he doesn't like to admit when he is, and all that kind of stuff. And at this point, he's being damaged by that. At any point along the way, he could have, you know, been like, look, dude, I got carried away with myself and it got me into some stuff and we're on the wrong path, kids. Let's course correct. Right. But his ego won't allow that.
That doesn't happen unless it has to do with Trump, in which case, you know.
But if Trump does one thing he likes, he goes back to he swings back and forth. I mean, I don't pay attention. I haven't paid attention to Alex for a long time. And so unless you are actively pursuing him, you can't anymore because there's no clips popping up in my YouTube feed to just monitor things on. But
he's still on YouTube. I mean, it's not the same that it was.
It doesn't come up in my feed anymore.
No, because it's going through a different channel, different pseudonym. So I found something really interesting. Let me do a screen share on this.
Okay.
This is now, and I'm not saying that this is gospel by any means, but it's worth kind of going down the rabbit hole. So I found this website, betnet.com.
Okay.
And
wait. Look, just real fast. I just noticed that there was a comment where it said something about the Roman Catholic Church.
I'm going to read it.
Okay, because this morning when I did a remote view to try and look in and see if I could get any information, all I saw was Catholic symbolism.
So this has to do with James Twyman, Medjugorje, some of his stuff, because I did this search, right?
And there's something there about Malachi Martin. I remember Duncan O'Finian talking about him years ago. Yeah.
So this is from 2005. So we're talking 14 years ago. And this woman, Carrie, says, Melanie, the painting may be done in a manner of style, but according to Twyman, it is a rendering and paint of a photograph he took. No, that's James Twyman.
James Twyman.
Here is the original photograph according to Twyman. Long neck, no feet. Malachi Martin said he had doubts about Medjugorje because Mary has no feet. He made a reference to hooves under the dress. Martin was an exorcist. One would think his opinion would be significant. He's a shadowy character, too.
Yeah, Duncan used to talk about him.
Well, Medj is getting enormous attention. The approved apparition at Akita, which is said to be a continuation of Fatima as well, gets little notice. The seer, Senior Sasagawa, is astigmatic, if I recall correctly. There's not the commercialism associated with it. It is much more in keeping with the other approved apparitions, unlike Medj. Something else interesting, the last name Twyman. Do you have a copy of William Kennedy's book, Lucifer's Lodge? The book about the priestly sexual abuse scandal that was published last year. So that would be 2003. Kennedy says he worked with Malachi Martin in attempting to get to the root of the network of the priests in the church. Anyway, the book has an introduction written by Tracy R. Twyman. Twyman has her own webzine, Daggerbird's Revenge. Were you familiar with this?
Yeah, she talked about it when she was on the show with me. That was how she got started into the sort of occult stuff. It was her own underground thing she did when she was in college.
A website devoted to the Merovingian dynasty, the Knights Templar, Dan Brown, Bejent, Lincoln, and lay material. She edits Red Dragon Press. She also has her own magical fraternity called Ordo Lapsit Exilis.
She talked about that with me too.
In short, an OTO lodge. She makes it quite clear in the website that they revere Lucifer. She works with a man named Bud Rice. That's Boyd Rice, by the way.
Okay.
Boyd Rice is a full-blown Satanist. I'll keep reading.
This was from her early days, and
they had a falling out at one point. She and Rice went to René Le Chateau and did some digging. I don't remember what they claimed to have found. Rice is a musician and artist. His rendering of Lucifer adorns the cover of British journalist Gavin Baddeley's book, Lucifer Rising. Baddeley specializes in the occult, rock music, and trash culture, according to the jacket. During his research for his book, he was made a priest of the Church of Satan by Anton LaVey, who dubbed him a smart cookie. On page 181 of Lucifer, Baddeley writes, Boyd Rice, one of Shrink's former heretical brethren in the Church of Satan, first made his name as an experimental musician in the late 1970s under the name of Non. Early releases included 7-inch singles with 3 or 4 different holes drilled so they could be played off-center. An album called Pagan Music, or Muzak, featuring a dozen locked grooves offering 12 loop tracks could theoretically play for all infinity. Rice was a pioneer of the industrial genre, working in pure noise, sounds that stretch definitions of the word music to breaking point beyond. I used to sell that stuff, by the way.
Yeah, that's the shit that opens up portals, right? It opens up a vibration, it opens up a geometry, some of those noises, and that's how some stuff gets, that moves between.
So she's making this connection. I don't know if Tracy R. Twyman and James F. Twyman are related or not, but they're both working with Cathar-related concepts. William Kennedy told me in email that he and Twyman do the intro to his book because she was the publisher, the only publisher who would publish his writings. Apparently, he tried to get material on the scandal at the Catholic publications, but had no success. So this goes on a little bit. Now, some people basically tell her she's a nutcase.
So, I mean, Tracy, this was stuff, in her early days when she started looking on the other side, she got into really looking at some of this stuff. I don't know that she revered Lucifer. She certainly never said anything like that to me, but that is certainly not where she was at the end of her arc or her road. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, she talked openly about that, and, she has a lot of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the connection is very interesting because they're using the same painting. Mm-hmm. And, and it could be just, one of these unusual sinks, but there you go.
I mean, it makes me wonder, we talk about things like that if we live in a simulation, we talk about certain kinds of synchronicity, we talk about bloodlines. She does have the appearance of a certain kind of bloodline, like her physicality is unusual, you know what I mean, her coloring and her features.
Tracy was a very unusual looking person.
Very unusual looking person, and it makes me wonder, does have her bloodline been involved in some of this stuff in the past? Was she, you know, were there people in her bloodline who whistle blew us on the past? If we are talking about, you know, other lives, was this something that she has a innate, you know, ancestral DNA understanding of, kind of thing, right? You know, and maybe Twyman as well. I mean, there's, you know, James Twyman. It's so, I mean, there's so many things that I'm just coming to understand about this very strange place that we live, and who and what we are, and time and no time, and that, you know, why was she doing this? You know what I mean? Like there's, you know, the reasons that are obvious to some of us, and then I'm sure there's a multitude of reasons and drives that she had that maybe she wasn't even 100% conscious of.
So Twy is a derivation of the word Twyla.
Mm-hmm. I think I always think about, when I think of Tracy Twyman, for some reason the name that always pops in my head is Twyla Tharp.
The meaning of the name is woven with a double thread.
Yep, that's it right there. That's Tracy. She was definitely woven with a double thread. Wouldn't you agree?
No doubt. And even, I mean, if you get into that last video, there is a almost schizophrenic double thread running through it. And I'm not saying Tracy was schizophrenic, but the thread with the separation of two different entities with two different names.
What she was talking about was somebody who was representing something of a double thread. Yeah.
That's right.
Not Tracy. Not Tracy.
But I do think that Tracy was a person who was very aware of and accustomed's not the word, aware of and very familiar with darkness.
Yes.
Very, very much. And then you may say that there would be equal parts light there. And maybe that she was driven to do what she did because of her knowledge of how dark things are. And I don't know. I mean,
this work may have been redemption for her.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. And maybe there is a past to Tracy. I'm just speculating here, kind of opening things up. But there's a past to Tracy that we don't know about. And
in this life or another, yeah.
And she was in the process of redeeming that in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And we all go through different stages in life too. Like at one point in time, I used to think David Spangler was really great. I met David Spangler.
Who's David Spangler?
David Spangler was, he was kind of like a New Age prophet, and he was one of the founding members of Findhorn. And
I don't know what Findhorn is. Yeah.
Findhorn is an intentional community.
Oh, you've talked about this before,
in Scotland, right. So, I was really taken with Findhorn, which really at the end of the day was probably an MI6 operation, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I hate to kind of admit that.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it, Findhorn was actually really freaking powerful. I mean, I experienced some stuff there. Real, fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional.
Oh, it's kind of like an Estelin,
High woo.
Like an Estelin kind of thing. Like there's stuff going on there, and there's a bunch of operations being run through it.
Yeah, like Findhorn was a spiritual semiconductor.
Yeah.
Really, it was, and or super collider, a spiritual super collider. So anyway, David was one of the, after Findhorn starts to get established, he hooks up with this woman named Myrtle Blinds, who's an older woman and a psychic, and she is grooming David to be this kind of New Age prophet. And so I started to read David Spangler's books. And one of those books, he talks about Lucifer. And he talks about how Lucifer is the light bringer and is the creative force in the world. And that if you really want to attain a high level of consciousness, that you have to make peace with Lucifer, or that archetype inside of yourself. So there was a time in my life where I thought, he makes sense. Like, I've read William Blake, okay? This falls in alignment with Blake in some ways. And as I've evolved and kind of moved through time, it's like, David may not have been right. He may have been right for a particular model. And maybe this is what Tracy was was evolving through.
Yeah.
Because we have ideas. We take on ideas and we think that they're interesting or they're meaningful, but ultimately they don't stand the test of time. And then we do something else.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and she was definitely a person who, as she knew more and moved through these things she discovered, she changed, she evolved. My experience of her, you know, was that she was actually just kind of like a normal mom who happens to know all of this stuff. I thought she was nice. I thought she was friendly. She did have a bit of a heavy energy to her. And I think that's what knowing this stuff and having done the things she did, I don't think there's no price for it. And I think she was prepared to live with that and obviously prepared to die for that. And I think it's tremendously sad. I think we know things that we wouldn't have known otherwise because of her. I'd
agree with that.
You know, and I just think this is a huge loss for our community, obviously for her family. And I'm just almost without, I'm not a person who doesn't feel good very often. And I had some strange physical sensations going on this morning as I was, I wasn't even paying attention to the time that Wimbledon was on, and I couldn't even really pay attention to it. And I just was like, the more I sat with this, the more disturbing it got. There was no way in my mind to rationalize this or understand this or make this okay. And I think this is one we'll be feeling the sting of for a while. And, I hope for her sake that, something is able to be done with this information that she's uncovered.
Right. I put the video up. I put it up on BitChute.
Yeah.
So it's there. We'll put it up on the link here. And I do think it's worth viewing, even if you get an understanding about sort of the perfidious nature of people who are basically pretend to be one person and then wind up being another, whether it's literal or the whole thing is just very strange.
Very strange. Very disturbing. And, all I can just keep thinking about, guys, is, tell your friends you love them today. Tell the people that you care about and you respect, that you love them. And sometimes we have little squibbles and tiffs with people over really minor stuff. And I think today's a day for us all to look at the bigger picture and appreciate the people who we've learned from and that have been our friends.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing about, this little world that we happen to populate for this moment in time together is that we're not perfect. We're not perfect. We have our biases, we have our beliefs, we have our passions, and it's quite easy to have beefs with people. And I think this is kind of a moment in time where, it might be really good to look at that. It doesn't mean that you give people a pass if they're consistently fucking people over or leading people down the wrong path. But let's be more objective about what we're beefing about. If that's
Yeah. More objective, more compassionate to people, and let's really keep our eyes on the bigger picture and not get so lost in the weeds.
So this is a very interesting event in terms of time, as it relates to Epstein, as it relates to what, for all intents and purposes, looks like a nuclear explosion in Ridgecrest, California.
Yeah.
The amount of damage that was done, there's a picture. I don't have it. There's a picture.
I can tell you, these were the strangest earthquakes ever, and I've lived through quite a few.
There was a picture that they showed from an aerial. I mean, basically, it's like this. It's like this, where like there's a major kind of crack in that area. It's like the separation, the height between one part of the landmass and another is, you can see it. You see it from an aerial photo, and apparently they've had a massive bee die off in that area too. So there's probably a really good probability that either the nuclear reactor that's underneath the ground there at China Lake exploded, or somebody exploded the reactor. one of the two.
I think this is all interesting with the new season of Stranger Things coming out the other day, where they're beaming plasma laser beams into the earth, trying to open something up. That area, China Lake, and the name of it obviously is very interesting. It's in Kern County, which, so this whole thing with Tracy has me looking at some funny stuff, right? Because she's talking in that video about a campground, right? Mm-hmm. And camping has always been a big no-no for me. And the reason that I don't go camping is because of something that happened to me in Kern County.
Interesting.
Kern County happens to be the only place my father has ever taken me for a nature activity. He took me river rafting on the Kern River there when I was a kid. But it's also the only place I ever went to sleepaway camp in Kern County. And this sleepaway camp, we were sleeping in partially outdoor. It was like a beds with hut, like roof, but open sides, right? And one morning I woke up with what appeared to be a spider bite over my eye and unable to open my eye. And because of that, I have never slept outside ever again since, which seems like maybe a strong reaction. But I also have almost no memory of anything else that happened while I was at that camp for 2 weeks.
Right.
And so I've targeted that time as a time some funny stuff may have gone on with me. But I also know that there are lots of people out there who have been through mind control kind of stuff and projects and programs who have spent a lot of time at campgrounds, have gone camping because that's a place that they thought they felt safe, right? And what may be going on in some of these campgrounds, right? And so these are all little weird things that popped up this morning, listening to you talk about China Lake, listening to Tracy talk about this campground in Arizona. And knowing that somehow the programs with children and pedophilia are also related to use of exotic weaponry, both nuclear, and whether it be LENR or regular nuclear, right? Like there seems to be some sort of energetic, if no other, connection between those things. Mm-hmm. So, so that this happens at the same time that this Epstein thing happens, at the same time this Tracy thing happens. At the same time, Stranger Things is having, I just don't think this is coincidental.
Yeah, the Epstein thing, I talked about a little bit this on my show today. And the thing that interests me about Epstein is all the people that are associated with Epstein that we don't hear about. I mean, we know who might be the top level people. There's the Prince Andrews and the Clintons and the Dershowitz and Courtney Love, et cetera, et cetera. But there are other people that were involved in Epstein land that may not have been on the flight manifest, or they may not have been in his black book, but they're there. They're there. And I thought about how they must be feeling at this point, right? Knowing that there's a guy who is on ice right now who could, potentially turn their world upside down.
I almost feel like I'm going to throw up just listening to that.
And so now you got a bunch of people who are basically running scared, right? And, probably, calling their fixers or whatever. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? So now you've got this thing that has been set loose in our consciousness. And these people who I think are going to start to act very scared and very desperate. And that's going to be very interesting to watch. Like, I think we'll see things with people that we don't know about that'll start to sound very bizarre. And, and this Epstein thing is going to have a major chain reaction. Now, it may not, just like China Lake, okay? We may not see it on the surface. Like, there may be a few people who might do the perp walk, okay? Just like we saw that there is a major crack in the land and we have a Richter scale recording and all that. But we don't know what really is the extent of the damage underneath that Ridgecrest area. Just like with Epstein beneath the surface, we don't know what the extent of that damage is causing right now. And I believe it is causing damage. And my sense is a lot of people are in damage control. And I just think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And sometimes these events will spill over into our so-called waking world, or this, whatever this kind of matrixy like reality we're living in is. I think these events are connected.
Yep.
Maybe not necessarily from an explosion standpoint, or maybe they are. Who knows what really is going on in China Lake? I mean, they could have a lot of really weird. We don't know. Maybe some people do, or some people claim to, but at least the kind of the impact, and I say impact socially and geophysically, are reflective of one another. And we're back into Gemini again, right? Mm-hmm. When people found out that Epstein was arrested, that was a shock. That was like a 7.1 on the Richter scale of news. And it's the equivalent of the China Lake earthquake. So I think we're in very interesting territory here, to be quite honest with you.
It was a very unusual earthquake. I was home and felt them both. And the second one went on for a very long time. But what was weird with both of them is you never really got the feeling that they were going to erupt into a violent kind of shake. They were very rolling and wavy, nothing we have a lot of stuff, right? My dad has a lot of tchotchkes and things like that. Nothing fell, right? But it was going on for a long time. It was different. It didn't feel like, your usual.
Right. I used to live on the Hayward fault line. Mm-hmm. Right on it. Literally ran right under our house. And we would experience about 5 to 6 earthquakes a year in the Hayward fault line.
Yeah.
And these would be violent. Violence, buckling.
Yep.
You could feel the foundation torque.
Yeah, this was not quite like that. This was just like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So getting back to your Oregon thing, you were talking about, because I was listening. I was also trying to find this Twyman connection. That whole thing with, so what's going on in the cities of the United States is truly frightening. Mm-hmm. Because what's happened is that, and I'm going to use the word left, because there is an ideology of the left that is actually performing a role, right? Mm-hmm. So what we have is the cities of America have basically been populated by left mayors. Mm-hmm. And you can see that these policies throughout all these cities in America are starting to look very much the same. And the policies this has just happened recently in Austin last week, and people in Austin are not happy about this. The city of Austin and Stephen Adler, the mayor, basically have said, well, the homeless can be anywhere they want. Mm-hmm. They can be anywhere they want now in Austin, which means that if you've got a really nice place in, say, northwestern Austin.
Mm-hmm. Cat Mountain, some of those play areas. Yeah.
Right. If some homeless guy wanted to pitch a tent on the sidewalk near your home, guess what? He gets to stay there. That is the law now in Austin. The cops can't do anything. And this is the same thing that's happened in Seattle, the same thing that's happened in Portland, the same thing that's happened in San Francisco, and the same thing that's happening in LA. Same thing. Now, there's sowing the seeds of discontent. And in Seattle, I don't know if you saw the movie Seattle is Dying, the internet documentary. Have you seen that?
No. Okay.
It's worth seeing.
Okay.
And it was actually done by KOMO, TV station in Seattle. And I'm sure they took a lot of heat for it. Because what they were able to illustrate is that the people in Seattle, this guy ran a report on all these people that are arrested. And some of these people have been arrested 35 to 40 times over an 18-month period. And just let go back onto the street. Mm-hmm. And this is what's happening in the cities of America. And the police have been given stand-down orders.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the things that there's a clip of Andy Ngo was on Joe Rogan yesterday. Uh-huh. And you have to listen carefully with all of this stuff. So there's these group of people, some of them are intellectual dark web members that are slightly more sane or are more honest lefties, right? Like the Weinstein brothers and whatnot, who they're telling this stuff. And there's a lot of definite truth there. But there's also this like other layer where either they don't seem to get it, which would be odd because they're very intelligent, or they're intentionally not getting it on a certain level, right? So he's talking about that in this one clip where it says, you look up under the JRE clips channel, Andy No explains why Antifa isn't being arrested. He talks about in Portland, the mayor is also the police commissioner. And basically they've been ordered to not arrest. So I'm assuming this goes the same for some of these other things. They've been ordered to not arrest Antifa because that might incite the crowd or the mobs, right? And the chief of police is asking the mayor to take off this leash of not letting them arrest Antifa, and the mayor, quote unquote, and police commissioner, which is a huge conflict of interest to be doing both jobs, is using his position to make this a political issue and is choosing not to do that. And you have this weird situation where this is making him obviously unpopular with anybody who's right of center, but also unpopular with the extreme left because they don't think he's going far enough, right? They would probably prefer that he not arrest Antifa and that he arrest anybody who's right of center, right? Kind of thing. So we're in a really weird space and place here.
Well, this gets back to a conversation we had a couple, I think maybe the last episode or show we did, maybe the one before that, and it gets into psychic driving. Yeah. And these are all elements at a macro level of psychic driving. Mm-hmm. That's one element, right? Just ramming our consciousness with this idea that there's no order anymore. There's no social order anymore. And people are living with this every single day now. No social order, breakdown of the social order. And when that happens, then there becomes the breakdown of the individual.
Well, I think that's also what was happening to Tracy with the hijacking of her technology. I think she was being exposed to electronic psychic driving through some of these people she was really interacting with and some of these other fake kinds of things. And when she tried to take it to the FBI, they didn't help her. And it led on a certain level to some breakdown for her.
Right. That's a really, really good point. Because in that video, she talks about how she went to the FBI and she basically had to speak to them through a box.
They wouldn't let her in.
They wouldn't let her in.
So, which is also in Portland, where the police commissioner and the mayor are the same person. Right. And so the public is being psychically driven, and individuals who are aware of this level of psychic driving are being exposed to a different level of technological psychic driving that is meant to break them down.
So what we're really looking at here, and this is, this may strike people as being slightly paranoid, but it's really based on observation, is that really high levels of government, middle levels of government, business, technology, they've all been infiltrated. Mm-hmm. They've all been infiltrated for all intents and purposes by what I would consider to be a satanic, Luciferic group that wants to create an upside down, a Stranger Things reality. Mm-hmm. And they want to make everything that we've had as part of a quote unquote social order to be obsolete, right? And they're replacing all these values. They're replacing, just like the statues, whether you agree with them or not, like replacing the statues in the South. Yeah. It's the same.
Part of our history. And, look, even if you're on the far left side, right, which is a fine place to be if you come to that honestly and you can have a conversation, the argument should be made that we need those statues there so nobody ever forgets what happened.
That's right.
And rather than tearing them down, should there maybe put a statue up of the person who fought against those people on the other side? Sure, maybe that's a conversation to have, right? But we should not be erasing history, no matter how unflattering it is.
Right, absolutely. I've been paying attention to these flash mobs that are erupting, and I started to pay attention probably about 6 months ago, just after school got out. Actually, that'd be about 4 months ago, right around May, right? May?
We're in July. It's 2 months ago.
So May, June, July, about 3 months ago. A little bit before that.
Yeah.
But I've been watching these flash mobs erupt, and they're this is not good. First of all, I think some of them are being astroturfed. That's a whole other discussion. But these flash mobs are coming up, and there was one that happened in Wisconsin where these guys ran in to the North Face store and they took $30,000 worth of goods. Right? And it blows my mind because there are people that will justify that. They'll justify it. Oh, well, I'm sure it was made in a sweatshop anyway.
Right.
Or, yeah, well, what do you expect? They charge such high prices.
Yeah.
It's a ripoff. They're just getting ripped off. I mean, whatever. These are
the same people that defend Antifa's tactics.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that happened, and then a few days later, on July 4th, in Philadelphia, of all places, right, home of the Liberty Bell and the signing of the Declaration of Independence, big flash mob goes and runs through Walgreens, and the footage is disturbing. Kids running around, knocking shit down, throwing things at the people that work there, pilfering candy bars. They're in and out in about 30 seconds. They've got angles from all over the place. And it's clear that most of them are anywhere between 18 and 12 years old.
Wow.
And earlier in the summer, actually late spring, I saw something erupt in Chicago. A couple of weeks later, I saw something erupt in Memphis. And then the one in Memphis was really kind of scary. I thought for a moment that Memphis was going to go into kind of a full riot mode at some point.
Well, and Memphis is a kind of a terrifying place for that to happen because the city of Memphis is encircled by a business loop.
Yeah.
Right. The way that is. And so that, the way that city is sort of enclosed, and some of the history of that city, that could be kind of terrifying.
Absolutely. And Memphis has a kind of a history of violence. It's a pretty violent place. So this is another part of this psychic driving now is taking place.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the flash mobs for sure. And I think they're experimenting with organizing them online, but ultimately it'll become something that's handled remotely, that is just done by activating people's nervous systems.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it's already in play, but.
Yeah. I think the flash, my intuition, my hit on the flash mobs is that they're being orchestrated and infiltrated.
It's like part of a swarm drone technology.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's coming out of, I think the flash mob strategy and deployment is coming out of Chicago. That's what I think.
Probably, yeah.
Right. I think this is a full-on Alinsky-esque, Black Lives Matter next level.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And probably with some participation at a high level with the so-called forces of justice, right? Because we've seen the CIA and the FBI, get involved in COINTELPRO or or the FBI, pretending to be a terrorist and getting people to go get involved with something and then saying, "Hi, you're a terrorist," right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So that's my sense. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
It is because you've got a lot of people who are already disaffected, pissed off,
don't have jobs,
or convinced that somehow this world has, dicked them over, and now they've got to go.
And in some cases, they're right, but this doesn't help.
Look, one could make a justification if one wanted to for just about anything, and you're right. Some people have a really hard place to start in life.
Yeah.
Okay. That's just the way it is. I don't know what it's like to have a different skin tone. I can't profess to know what that's like. And I'm sure it's not easy, okay? It's not easy. And I've seen people, whatever their station in life, ultimately transcend
make it
their limitations. And I don't care if you've got, one stumpy arm and somehow manage to run a marathon or something, because there are people that do that stuff, right?
Well, did you ever see that? There was a documentary about it, that the long lost sister who had been given away for adoption or something of Dominique Moceanu. She was born with no legs. She was born just with an upper body, and that was it. And it was given up for adoption, right? And they ended up, coming together years later. Dominique Moceanu, she was a gymnast as well. She found a way to do gymnastics with no legs.
Right.
And Dominique Moceanu was her favorite gymnast, and she found out later that was her sister. Right.
Wow.
and you know, then they made a book or something together, you know. So you have one here who is an Olympic champion and one who has no legs. And the one with no legs almost seemed to be a happier person than Dominique Moceanu.
There's the Gemini effect again, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. One of my clients, her name is Joe. Her son was born with no legs,
Mm-hmm.
and he got a scholarship to MIT. You see, yeah. I mean, I think, and by the way, he was not born into a family of privilege. Trust me on this. This is a family, hard-time family living in the South. So, you know, we can transcend our condition in life. It doesn't mean that some people don't have it bad. Some people are born into a situation where it could be super challenging.
Yep.
We get that. We totally get that. But this stuff doesn't help. It doesn't help.
No.
No.
It doesn't help. All right. What else you got?
Well,
you think we're done? Maybe you think we're done?
I think so. I wanted to show this picture though.
Okay.
Do you want me to show this one picture that I found?
As long as it's not going to get us a copyright strike.
Yeah, I'm famous for that. It's that jade helm picture.
Oh yeah, this is weird. You were telling, yeah.
So you guys got to see this. This is a trip. So my friend Kimberly was in Oregon recently, and she's kind of on the outskirts of the wine business anyway. She got this newspaper, Willamette Valley, who knows what it is, right?
And more Oregon here, more Oregon, since our focus is Oregon today.
Yeah, and she saw this. She sent this to me. A Georgia peach who put down roots in the Willamette Valley, Jade Helm.
Yeah.
Provided wine education through articles and consumer trade publications, speaking engagements and classroom instruction for the past 5 years. Her expertise is evidenced by credentials from the Society of Wine. Jade Helm. Who has a name called Jade Helm?
Well, and I mean, think about, so Georgia peach, we got the Guidestones, right? Oregon is where all this weird stuff is coming from. I mean, a lot of weird stuff comes from Georgia. Her name is, she's kind of weird looking.
She's, look, we are not casting aspersion.
It's not a judgment
on Jade Helm, but I have to
actually look at the picture to her right. That left side, the side of that guy's face almost looks like Alex Jones with his beard now.
She's an odd-looking person, this Jade Helm, right?
Yeah. So I don't know if this is anything or not anything at all, but it is a little weird. It's more Oregon.
Would you let Jade Helm babysit your kids?
No, I would not.
I wouldn't either.
And she's not exactly what you think of when you think of a Georgia peach.
It's not a Georgia peach.
Leave it at that.
No. I've seen Georgia peaches. I know what they look like.
Right, yeah.
That might be like a Georgia rhubarb.
All right. So I think we'll wrap up here. I'm just kind of feeling very blah. So Tracy Twyman, goodbye. Thank you for your contribution. And
wherever you are, Tracy, I hope you're navigating and getting through the dark portals, if there are any.
I'm glad I got to meet her and talk to her, you know. So I think we'll just leave it at that.
We'll post the video.
Yeah.
And as kind of a memory of Tracy, and please share it. It's worth sharing.
Yeah.
At the very least, it's the least we can do for somebody. Right?
Go hug the people you love, and yeah.
Yeah, and you people in the truth the truth movement or whatever, alternative research, if you got a beef, maybe you want to put it on the back burner.
Yeah.
It's a good time for that.
Yeah. All right, guys. Have a good day. We're out. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.